Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube, where we appear twice, both in portrait and landscape format, which does seem repetitively redundant. Today, we need to talk about what we do now. It's easy to look at what's happening all around us and scream, this is wrong, this must end. And there's value in that. It's cathartic. It creates a connection with like-minded people. It creates attention to things that a lot of the American public isn't paying close attention to, and they should. And if they did, they might not feel too good about it. Never forget that those of us who are in the coalition of the sane are fighting not just right-wing disinformation, but public apathy. Never forget that Donald Trump only won in 2024 on the strength of voters who say that they pay little or no attention to the news. Kamala Harris actually won among people who pay at least some attention. So there's value in venting our outrage. Now, what's slightly harder to do is to look at what's going on and break it down, explain exactly why it's wrong and why it must end. And there's certainly value in that. I do a lot of it, or at least I try to on my Worth Knowing Substack. For example, last week, I wrote an article called This is Actually Happening, which broke down point by point a story spreading on social media about what ICE had been doing in Minnesota. And my aim was to show proof that these horrifying things were real, that ICE agents were cruising areas with immigrant-owned businesses and kidnapping people, abducting U.S. citizens, even as they begged to be allowed to retrieve their papers, putting people in chokeholds while they were out on their lunch break, smashing into cars, pepper spraying people, breaking down doors without proper legal warrants, forcing kids to be shuttled secretly to and from school until the school system decided to just go virtual to protect them, to protect kids from masked federal agents with guns who might kidnap them. So again, I think there's value in running through all of that point by point because there's so much misinformation and bullshit and so much motivated reasoning on the part of people who are in or have been in the MAGA cult. They're subjected to so much official and unofficial propaganda through right-wing media that delousing their intake and making sure that persuadable or disconnected voters don't just hear the lies, it's incredibly important. This is, for example, what my friend and frequent guest Dan Perry of the Substack Ask Questions Later, former lead Associated Press editor for the Middle East and Europe, wrote about just yesterday as he broke down the letter that President Trump sent to the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Store. And he showed line by line what was false, fantasized, and downright deranged. But after we've expressed that anger and outrage, after we've sorted truth from lies, what we're left with is a third level, the hardest level, making decisions. It's hard because it's not like those of us in the coalition of the sane are part of one cohesive organization. We're Democrats, independents, disaffected Republicans, and people who hold allegiance to no political party, but rather simply to the rule of law and the truth. So we don't have a leader. And yet somehow we do have to make decisions. We have to decide on strategies. We have to decide on focus. And to the extent that that job falls to the Democratic Party, it's a reminder of that old joke. I belong to no organized party. I'm a Democrat. And that was before our entire party decided with some merit that they don't trust our leaders anyway. And yet, despite all the challenges, this is what I tried to do in my article from January 15th entitled, Can Anything Be Done to Rein in This Violent Authoritarian ICE? To which I answered yes. And I laid out the case that pushing to abolish ICE or defund ICE or defund or stop the congressional bills that give funding to ICE would be a mistake. It would be a strategic trap. It would actually set back the cause that we all believe in. And instead, I suggested a different approach. But of course, not everyone agrees with that. My recent guest, Jonathan Larson of The Fucking News, wrote on January 17th, quote, Democrats may have defensible reasons for funding the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, State, and more, but I haven't heard any. And he's not alone. There are plenty of people who are friends and allies and whose opinions I respect who are arguing the exact same way, who say that we're caught up on tactics while we're enabling a moral horror. Let's look at another example. I mentioned that article from Dan Perry. Here's what he wrote. I know that the Republicans who are in a position to keep Trump in check are very busy indeed, spending their days and nights licking his boots and trembling in fear of being primaried. They may not have had time to consult the Constitution So as a public service, on the cusp of 1 year since Trump re-entered the Oval Office, I offer a handy cheat sheet. Ratified in 1967, the 25th Amendment provides a constitutional mechanism for dealing with presidential incapacity. Its most consequential provision, Section 4, allows the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. He goes on to say that while this is far from likely, even after the November midterm elections, when the lemmings in Congress may feel a bit more free, stranger things have happened. Now, here's the thing. Dan is slightly understating the case. Right now, I'm writing a new article for Newsweek, where both Dan and I appear as columnists, in which I explain exactly why invoking the 25th Amendment and removing Donald Trump from office is impossible. Okay, mathematically, it's not 0%, which of course reminds me of Dumb and Dumber.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yes, I'm telling you that there's a chance, but no, really, truly, as things stand right now, there is no chance. But that doesn't mean it might not be a good idea to push it anyway. Sometimes in politics, making charges about things that have even a grain of truth and putting your opponent on the defensive is a winning approach. There's an old story in politics that's attributed to Hunter S. Thompson about one of Lyndon Johnson's early campaigns in Texas. Sorry, this is about to get a little rude here. The race was close. Johnson was worried. So finally, he told the campaign manager to start a rumor that his opponent had carnal knowledge of some of his farm animals. The campaign manager said, "We can't get away with calling him a pig fucker. Nobody's going to believe that." And Johnson said, "I know, but let's make the son of a bitch deny it." In this case, Donald Trump's steep cognitive decline, his disordered thinking, his lost grip on reality, these are all very real, very full of proof, caught on video. We don't need to make anything up. But that's where the decisions come in. That's where the strategy comes in, because there is definitely a case for making Republicans defend insanity. Give them whiplash by making them defend dementia a year and a half after it was their main attack on President Biden. But on the other hand, Democrats are winning right now on affordability. Democrats are winning on tariffs. Democrats are now even winning on the question of whether ICE has gone too far. In fact, Democrats are winning on every single issue in polling, with the exception of border security and cutting federal spending, both of which are kind of laughable, but moving on. So, since voters already know that Donald Trump is crazy and unhinged and not in touch with reality, and they elected him in 2024 anyway, why would we prosecute that case when we're sprinting toward the end zone on other cases? The point is, there's always trade-offs. Now, I happen to think that the best way to win back a measure of control of the federal government and put back up some guardrails around this insane tyrant and rein in ICE is just to focus on practical things that would constrain what ICE is allowed to do. But maybe I'm wrong. I could be. After 9/11, as part of the intelligence reform, analysts were required to look at their assumptions and consider alternatives, to acknowledge uncertainty. And when we're talking about trying to stop Trump from dissolving the Western alliance, invading yet more countries, continuing to rain terror on the American people through his own personal Gestapo, Joe Rogan's words, not mine, when the stakes are that high, then we need to acknowledge where we might be right, where we might be wrong, and where we don't know. And believe me, my outrage, my fury at what is happening because of Trump and his enablers to my beloved country and to free people around the world is immense. I'll take the Pepsi challenge on that with anyone any day, but of course, that can't be our only guide. So my goal today isn't necessarily to convince others that I'm right. My goal is to try to present and understand the trade-offs, the options, think about what the smartest approach is to try to get us out of this mess. Now, when US senators in the Democratic Party had to do that, when they had to understand their options in policy, legislation, media, public opinion, and then come up with a strategy, they turned to one guy, Ryan McConney, who led the Senate Democratic Policy and Communications Center. And so today, I'm going to ask Ryan to go back to the job that he used to do for US senators and do it for us. Ryan, welcome back. Oh no, you are not only muted, but frozen, my friend. There we go. You're unfrozen. You're like an unfrozen caveman lawyer.
I'm just an unfrozen caveman lawyer. My favorite one of those was where I think he was arguing a case in Mexico and he just spoke fluent Spanish.
That's right, exactly. I'm just a simple
Yeah,
unfrozen
yeah.
caveman lawyer.
Yo soy. It was we are dating ourselves so hard right now, talking about Phil Hartman sketches, but I don't care. It was
That's all
top
right.
shelf
I
stuff.
just made a Dumb and Dumber reference here, and I played the video too. So fuck it. All right, Ryan. For full transparency to folks in the chats, and I have not caught up, which I will try to do as we go live here. We are live. If anyone's wondering, Kinky Streets asks every week, "Are we live?" We are live. I'll try and catch up on the chats, but you and I set this up a tiny, tiny bit in advance. We know a little bit of where we're going to go, not entirely. We're like Michael Jordan. We're going to jump in the air and then decide. So let's start off with this question. I want to start with the Jonathan Larson piece, the funding piece. There is an active discussion right now about the way we fund ICE, the way we fund the overall Department of Homeland Security through Congress. Now, I don't want to try to break this down. It's a lot of nuance inside baseball shit that people don't want to deal with. But could you just walk us very briefly, high level, through what is the bill, what is the mechanism that Congress uses to fund the Department of Homeland Security and therefore to fund ICE? And why is this a decision point right now in terms of what Democrats do or don't do?
Sure. So ICE is typically funded under what they call the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. And that's one of the annual appropriations bills that Congress should pass. It doesn't always. Sometimes it does a continuing resolution. But that federal spending authority is particularly right now one of really the only lever that Democrats in Washington have to really make their voice heard. It's not, I don't want to say the only one because there are things on the margins. But as we just saw in the fight over the healthcare tax credits, that's where Democrats have the biggest stick to try and drive home a point. And so right now, Congress is working on the DHS funding bill. This is, breaking news this morning. They just released the version of the bill that now the House is supposed to consider this week, and that's come to the Senate. So strategically, this is the first decision point given everything we're seeing out of Minneapolis, everything we've seen in the weeks and months building up to this is what will Democrats do on this funding bill, and what is the best way to protest and rein in what's going on with ICE. And how does that stack up against really the long game here? So sort of what can Democrats do, and then what should Democrats do? And those are the things that people in Washington are working through right now.
So walk us through a little bit of what is in this. Actually, I'm going to first read back what you just said. So every year under the law, in theory, this was my first job in Congress. Actually, I worked for the Appropriations Committee. Every year, Congress is supposed to pass funding for everything that the federal government does. And they break that up into a series of bills, about a dozen. It's fluctuated over the years. One of them is the bill that funds the Department of Homeland Security and all of its subsidiary agencies. And right now, that funding bill is under consideration. So one option here would be for Democrats, like you were saying, when we shut down the government to elevate the ACA subsidy issue, that seemed to work. It really did elevate that issue. The salience in public polling skyrocketed. So one option would be to filibuster this bill and hold off on any support. As Jonathan Larson suggested, there's some moral high ground to that, and it might help elevate the issue of what's going on with ICE. What are the pros and cons to that?
Sure, and I'll weave in some of the differences with the healthcare fight here because I think that's actually instructive. So, I think the pro on that, and to spoil it, I don't think it's a good idea. So I don't think the pros list is very long. But if you were arguing for it, and there are some, Senator Murphy from Connecticut and others are definitely arguing we shouldn't be funding ICE at this point. It really is the symbolic and attention focusing benefit of it. You say, of everything that's going on, Greenland, tariffs, if you're going to shut the government down, Democrats are saying, America, you need to pay attention to this because this is the issue, and it's a way for Democrats to kind of make the news on this issue by shutting the government down and focusing that attention. Now, some differences with the healthcare fight. One, the tax credits were expiring, so there was a clear deadline for action here that Democrats built up to through a shutdown. Two, healthcare is an issue where Democrats tend to have an advantage politically. They're more trusted. And three, the healthcare issue is an affordability issue. It is an affordability fight, which is the kind of the driving narrative of 2026. Those things are not at play necessarily with the ICE fight. And I think one of the biggest things to point out is that a shutdown of the DHS or a shutdown of the government would not at all stop ICE. ICE has been put on autopilot by the Republicans in Congress and this administration. In the reconciliation bill that some refer to as the big, beautiful bill, they put $75 billion in there to basically pre-fund ICE that is separate from the annual appropriations process. So if you shut down DHS at this point, you're not shutting down ICE. You're basically furloughing TSA workers. You're undercutting FEMA if you need to respond to a disaster. It's basically all the other parts of DHS, but ICE would not skip a beat. So the question is, if you're Democrats, by shutting down, can we actually stop ICE from doing what it's doing? No. Is it a political fight that's worth having anyway? I would argue, and I think most would argue, that that is a trap that the White House would love Democrats to fall into.
So it just so happens that we've come to a comment here in sequence. I did not plan this, just catching up to everyone's comments in the chats from TrickyBlade_TV. Love your handle. That's a good handle. Reducing funding to ICE is a terrible idea. Pushing legislation to limit ICE's power is the right move. What you're basically telling me, the money sentence in there was, it wouldn't work. ICE is on autopilot. It has, because of the one big beautiful bill, all the funding it needs, and it would just keep sailing along. So we wouldn't be hurting ICE. We wouldn't be stopping ICE. All we would be doing is withholding funding from things that are actually relatively popular that Americans like, and moving the focus off of ICE onto, why is there no funding for FEMA? Why is there no funding for TSA? Why are airline flights slower or shut down? So I see that argument. By the way, while we're talking about things in the chats, I just want to point something out, and I haven't caught all the way up. This is my public service announcement that I do in virtually every live stream. I welcome dissenting views in the chats. I think it's healthy. If people have a perspective that differs from mine, not just if you're a Democrat who's like, no, defund ICE. I'm like, okay, let's hear it. Let's talk it out. That's what we're here to do. If you're a Republican or even a Trump fan who disagrees with me, all right, talk it out. Like we have Kevin Mays 1908. I'm not sure if you're being a little tongue in cheek, but just saying, no, we voted for this. I'm not sure if that's, no, we voted for this, or no, we voted for this. I'm not sure which it is. Either way, your comment is welcome. We have the J Barrow 51 who writes, you have such bullshit. Look at the way your boy Biden acted, ... blah, 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 blah. Look, I think I get what you're saying, the J Barrow, which is, what about Biden? Yeah, sure. What about Biden, right? I think you're referring to the dementia thing. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but sure, let's stipulate that. Let's stipulate that there was some slippage in cognitive faculties there. So let's be even-handed and apply it both ways. Okay. So what you're saying is very instructive and very interesting. But as you pointed out, Homeland Security and ICE, while they're incredibly important issues, they're not the only thing going on. What about the insanity happening in the Department of Justice? What about the insane gaslighting that's coming from Pam Bondi and her underlings who have decided not to investigate Jonathan Ross, Renee Good's killer, Renee Good's shooter, but to investigate her and her bereaved widow. What about that which drove 6 federal prosecutors to resign in protest? What about funding for the Department of Justice? Is there an option for what Democrats can do there?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, and not to take a very charged issue and make it wonky, which is something that Democrats love to do. But
Oh,
I
yes.
think,
Oh, you're speaking my love language. Please explain more minutia, Ryan.
But I think in these, Democrats actually have more control in these scenarios by passing these funding bills than they do by just putting the government on autopilot. Because if we look at the ICE example and the bill that just came out today, this is not going to satisfy and I think both Senator Murray, Congresswoman DeLauro said, like, look, more needs to be done. This is what we can do right now. And in the bill, on the Homeland Security bill, they have money for body cameras. They have prohibitions on Kristi Noem just taking money and moving it around like a slush fund. They have funding for the Inspector General's office that Trump tried to shut down that actually will impose some accountability. So, and you don't get those things if you put the government on autopilot or shut the government down. So I'm not going to sit here and claim that it is satisfying, and I'm not going to say that it's going to, solve the problem. But you ultimately, with the limited hand that Democrats have, they have more of a hand in the game by putting some legal bounds and some funding control over what goes to the government than by opting out of the funding process.
Let's address what 2 of our most frequent and insightful commenters have put into the chat in the last few minutes. I mean, we're slowly catching up to current time. This is from a few minutes ago. The Cynthia Rice says, tricky. Then how do you stop ICE from terrorizing people? And Lefty Gramp says, legislation limiting what the job description of these thugs would be a start, but legislation is a non-starter with the Congress and MAGA hands. All right, so let's address that. Now, what I advocated for in my article about whether we could rein in ICE was, if we agree that abolish ICE is a trap, and we can put that in the parking lot, and I can expand on why I think it's such a trap, why it's a messaging trap. But let's just say for a second that it's impractical for all the reasons you laid out, and it's probably strategically not a good idea. What about the specifics of mandating body cameras? You said there's funding in there for body cameras, but what if we mandated them? What if we put the focus on, you've got to identify who you are, what agency you work for? None of this like black balaclava shit, right? None of this generic police. You're not the fucking police. You're a fucking goon squad rent-a-cop. Fuck you. Okay? Oh, great. Now they're pounding at my door. What if you constrain, no chokeholds, de-escalation training? What if you put the focus? So this would do 2 things in my mind. One is, you might actually pass some of this, but I want you to evaluate that question. And second, by putting the focus not on, we want to defund ICE, we want to abolish ICE, we'd be putting the focus on putting Republicans on the spot to defend why these things should not be happening, why ICE should be allowed to continue wearing masks. What do you think about the effectiveness, politically and substantively, of that?
Yeah, I think that's the right direction. I think that's where Democrats are going. I mean, there are things in this bill, and I didn't give you the exhaustive list, but there is mandated, reporting of incidents. There is a requirement that every 30 days ICE has to report on its activities, or some of the funding gets turned off. There's de-escalation training. There are several of the things you're talking about, and those are, I think, generally, if calling for abolishing ICE is the trap, I think that the way that Democrats to actually embrace law and order and say that law and order has to apply to everyone, including law enforcement. And we have expectations of law enforcement. The job is to make communities safer. The things that ICE are doing on the ground here are not law enforcement. They're not making the community safer. You can listen to, the Minneapolis chief of police on that. And they're not going to pass all those things, but ultimately, the way that Democrats can truly rein this in is they have to get a seat back at the table, which means they have to win control of at least a chamber of Congress in 2026. And to do that, um, vision for what they think law and immigration enforcement need to look like. Because we're not, as Democrats, we're not starting at zero on this. We are starting at a deficit on immigration. And even as people say ICE has gone too far, they still trust Republicans more on immigration. We need to talk about what our approach to law enforcement looks like. I think, for example, Senator Cortez Masto has a really interesting proposal out there that would take the ICE autopilot money out of the reconciliation bill, and it would actually give it to local law enforcement so they could hire more police in the communities. They train, more officers. And so that's not about cutting ICE and cutting enforcement and undermining the rule of law. That's about doing the rule of law that serves communities better and is actually about making sure citizens are protected, because we can't fall back into the trap of being easily painted as lax on immigration, because when Democrats are painted as lax on immigration, that's how you get back to this situation where Trump gets elected, and now we're in a massive, massive swing the other way, and you have communities under siege.
I want to take an opportunity to address a few comments that have appeared. First, Tammy3126 writes, God thank for Trump. Would someone please call China and let them know that their bot is malfunctioning? Tammy3126, it's thank God for Trump, I think, is what your digital circuits were trying to create there. The Cynthia Rice points out something that, look, I don't want to get into a big argument over facts with people. Facts, schmacks. You can use facts to prove anything that's even remotely true. However, I would like to indulge in, if people would go with me on this, just reminding folks that Barack Obama, for good or ill, deported twice the number of people as Donald Trump did in 2025. Twice, without raining terror on American communities. How did he do that? Maybe because he wasn't obsessed with Stephen Miller level bullshit. Maybe it wasn't all a social media terror exercise meant to feed fundraising exercises for the National Republican Campaign Committee. Just possible. And then one final thing that I want to push over to you, Ryan. I think Democrats tend to get obsessed with the federal level. And one of the things that I pointed out, now, granted, you are a federal policy and communications expert. You're not so much a state guy. However, one of the things that Tricky Blade _TV points out is you have to pass legislation that limits ICE's power in the states. This also lines up with one of my recommendations for my article, which is there's a ton that we can do at the state level. And you've read my article. What do you make of that element of this? What else can we be doing at the state level that has a reasonable chance of reining in some of the abuse?
Yeah, and I think obviously Minneapolis, you have some other jurisdictions that are leading the way there, and the first thing they're doing, and I think that so far the Minneapolis PD has been doing a really commendable job just trying to keep a lid on the situation. I mean, part of this is incitement, and the chief has been very clear, like he does not want to see a repeat of 2020. So in a lot of instances, the police are trying to just keep be a buffer between ICE and protesters who are exercising their constitutionally protected rights. You've had, Minneapolis, you've had the DA and the police chief in Philadelphia say, if ICE comes in here and commits crimes, we're going to prosecute you because, even if you are part of ICE, you're not immune. And if you're violating the law, we're going to hold you accountable. Short of direct prosecutions, I think there is the specter of future accountability is part of what will hopefully keep some people in check from the extremes. And that means that I think, local police going around creating a record, if you are a citizen who, ICE has broken in your door without a warrant and you call the local police department, candidly, the police department may not be able to stop that in the moment, but there should be an incident report. There should be tracking of these these abuses so that cases can eventually be filed. So it's accountability, it's documentation for accountability, and where possible, protecting the communities that locals serve,
I want to.
and threatening
Oh,
that
go ahead.
accountability.
Well, I want
No, I was
to
going to say,
push
and
back
just
on a
threatening that
couple of
accountability
things.
as a, yeah.
Oh yeah. No, you finish. You finish. We're having a moment of tech lag, probably because I criticized a Chinese bot, and they're like, we'll show you. Maybe it's a Russian bot. I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to offend
Well,
you, Vlad.
I'll just sum up by saying I don't think the local authorities cannot directly intercede, and they're probably not going to be able to stop, but they can create an accountability environment that may make ICE agents think twice before they go ahead and cross the line.
And I love the bill that was introduced in Maryland that would prohibit state or local police from hiring people who worked for ICE in this time period. Now, that may run into legal problems. It could be tweaked. But the idea of people respond to incentives, the idea of making ICE officers think twice. I'm not saying they're going to self deport, but making them think twice, realize that there is a shadow, a specter of accountability out there. Stephen Miller had this unhinged comment. He put out this statement about, hey, ICE officers, just remember, no legal authority can constrain you. Anyone who stands in your way at the local level is breaking the law. Well, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, the fact that you have to say something like that means you are nervous. You are nervous as hell that ICE agents are aware of this. Like, he's nervous because they're nervous. And so ramping that up is effective. I just want to push back on a couple of comments. Again, I'm not going to ban anyone who's not like actively being a bigoted troll or a very obvious bot. But this is probably a bot comment. I think we need to stop funding to all the blue states that have been stealing trillions of taxpayer money. In 1990. There are so many problems with what you just said here. I don't want to unleash Ryan on you. Ryan has all the receipts. I'll just do this myself. I'm like Ryan's like much punier left-hand man. But this is fucking stupid, man. What, trillions in taxpayer money? Where do you think the taxpayer money comes from, you idiot? All right. Goodbye. And one more here. Oh, no, never mind. I'm not going to do the one more. I had one teed up that I thought was really particularly stupid, but I lost it. All right. Let's talk about the 25th Amendment. And I'm really looking, this is one where, I'm hoping to catch up to both everyone in the chat and to Ryan on this, because I am literally drafting. Like I'm writing right now. I took a break to do this live stream, and then I'm going back to writing. I really want people's input on this. I think, as I set up in the open, that there is an argument for pushing the 25th Amendment, for pushing the idea that it is the constitutional, moral, legal responsibility, the patriotic responsibility of the vice president and the members of the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment, Section 4, and deem that Donald Trump is clearly incapacitated. I know it's not possible. I know it won't happen. But there's a political case for pushing it. There's also a political case for not pushing it. Ryan, I'll go to you first before I look at what everyone has to say in the chat. What do you make of the case both ways?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to talk about the president's mental state. I think people can see it here with their own eyes there and make their own decisions. But I will speak. You brought me on to talk about sort of the politics of it, and I think I would answer your question with a question, which is, what do Donald Trump, Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, and Zoran Mamdani have in common?
They were all on a secret signal chat from Pete Hegseth that revealed the locations of all of our nuclear subs.
Well, no, because one of those people would have leaked it. But in all seriousness, the one common denominator is that they all ran their recent elections and won, talking about affordability, first, second, and third. And it's amazing. I think if we step back from all this, Americans have elected a MAGA president two centrist Democratic governors and a Democratic socialist mayor. So what they're basically telling us is we don't care what's riding in the sidecar as long as affordability is riding shotgun with these candidates. We don't care what's in the back seat. And so Democrats risk anytime you start to get off into stuff that can very easily be caricatured as Trump derangement system or creates a rally effect, just as the MAGA base is starting to fracture over, even healthcare stuff. Every time we're not talking about affordability, we are not talking about the thing that people care about most. And we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to talk about reining in ICE when we talk about affordability. We have to talk about clearly, the abuses of the Trump administration. But like when we start to talk, like, 25th, that is something that maybe people online can talk about. But like Democrats who are looking to win elections should be focused on affordability first, second, and third.
All right, let's take a step back here. I'm going to read that back. And yes, I'm sorry, I've been leaving MJ. MJ, I'm so fond of your comments that I want to leave them up on screen for a long, long time because I'm always interested in what you have to say. In this case, it was a little unintentional because I was trying to both listen and, multitask a little bit here. So you are in the stay on target camp. You are in the Star Wars stay on target, stay on target.
Red leader, underrated leader in the Star Wars saga. Red leader there.
Who? Underrated. Okay, who is the
that was gold leader. I'm sorry, we're about to go down a rabbit hole. Let's pull back here. But
no, I like rabbit holes. You want to go down a rabbit hole? Hold on, I'm gonna hide this. Wait, what about your party stealing billions, if not trillions, of money from American people? Jesus, the bots are strong. The force is strong with this one. Yes, now release your anger, Leslie Davis, bot 6875. Oh my gosh. That's a lie. Speaking of which, I would like to respond. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. You invited me to. This is your fault, not mine. GP5787 says, I really like your homosexual shirt. So first of all, thank you. I like my homosexual shirt too. I think it's quite nice. You know what you remind me of? Whatever the fuck your name is. You remind me of a parody on The Simpsons that I have pulled up and I'm going to play for you right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's up late, Miss McBain. I'm your announcer, Upper Coopenführer Wolfcastle. And here's McBain.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's nice. Let's say hello to my music guy, Scoey. That is some outfit, Scoey. It makes you look like a homosexual. Oh, maybe you all are homosexuals too.
All right, so apparently we have reached in the chats the level of parody. All right, back on track. So sorry. You were trying to say, stay on target, don't get sucked in. I mean, is this kind of, you were no longer doing this like synthesis of message job by the time Trump came on the scene, right? Like you weren't quite in that Democratic Policy Communications Center, but like,
right.
But is this kind of what you're so hooked in to the conversation among Democratic senators that's going on right now? Is this the constant conversation happening behind closed doors? Like, how do we avoid getting pulled into this shiny object, that shiny object? How do we stay on target?
Yeah, and it certainly is. And there's division in the party. It's not a new division, but when the stakes are higher and the environment is heightened, it's sort of the you have the populists versus the more moderate wing in terms of do we focus on the energy of the base, or do we try and reach across to voters who who are the swing voters and who maybe sometimes vote for Democrats, sometimes vote for Republicans, and if you feel base motivation is the way to go, then you want to be as loud as possible, as aggressive as possible. Focus on the you're basically in the Bernie wing. And so, maybe you're a little bit more inclined to have a shutdown over ICE versus others that think we need to kind of grow go wider instead of deeper to hit the vote totals we need. So it's very much. I mean, it's been an ongoing discussion since Harris lost, and it's a discussion that's going to keep going. And it's honestly not going to get into the midterms. I mean, it was sort of a you had I mentioned Spanberger and Sherrill. I think that's a pretty strong verdict for sort of that we need to grow win elections. But it's a discussion that's going to continue until that's what the primaries are going to be about in large part.
What do you think is really possible for Democrats to accomplish in Congress this year before the midterms? What should their objective be? There's a ton of comments here. I just referred to our friend MJ. Here's MJ with Jeffries, Booker, and Chuck giving the message useless. That does seem to capture a sentiment that's widespread in the Democratic Party right now, that our leadership is feckless, that our leadership can't get it done. So if you were sitting advising senators right now, given the fact that we're pretty locked out of power, that we have very, very limited levers to pull on, what should they be aiming for? What should their objective be?
Go back to both in terms of a commentary on the leadership and the types of things that Democrats need to do. They need to pick smart fights that focus public attention on places where Republicans are weak and failing. The shutdown did that. It was not a guarantee. I politically, Democrats did very well in that shutdown because they picked the right issue and they dug in very hard. It was a 40-day shutdown, and then Republicans are failing them. So they have to be smart about spotting those opportunities and go all in on them. I don't think ICE funding is that opportunity. But they also need to do more. The Democrats have rolled out now. They have a housing plan. They're going to be rolling out an energy plan. There was another podcaster, I won't say who, but he sort of, made the joke that, Republican numbers are crashing. They're almost to where Democrats are. Which is, I think, a little. But also, there's an element of truth that, the political environment is going to be very favorable, but Democrats still need to work on showing necessarily not what they can do now, but highlighting the contrast in where Republicans are failing and where Democrats can do better once we have a seat at the table. That I'm sure that's not sad. That's going to feel like a low ceiling. And the fact of the matter is, it's incredibly frustrating to be out of power. And I think the leadership gets that. Members of Congress get that, and there's a lot of anger out there, and it's shared. But we have to stay disciplined, or else we're just going to be angrier and angrier going forward.
Speaking of being
because we'll be on the outside for longer.
Well,
I was going to say,
we'll
be angrier for longer because we're going to be on the outside for longer. Yeah.
Right. I mean, one of the things that a Republican friend pointed out to me, I still have him, earlier this week is, this sucks, like, for Democrats. Like, we cannot possibly feel great about where we are because, as I pointed out earlier, it's not news to America that Donald Trump is crazy. Now, I think that he's been crazier. He's been less in touch with reality. He's shown more signs of incipient dementia than we predicted would be the case. It's gone to an even more extreme level than was being predicted a year and a half ago. But it's a difference of degree, not of kind. You pointed out earlier that we've been saying this guy is fucking crazy for a long time. And despite that, despite the fact that it's been obvious, we still lost. We still lost to him. And that has got to be sobering. And there has been a real division in the Democratic Party all year. And I know for the people who are pro-Trump but are not trolls and bots who are in the chat right now, you're going to enjoy this. This is the, hey, Dems, let's take a look in the mirror portion of the show. There has been an active discussion going on within the party for a year plus now about, like, hey, do we need to fundamentally change? And there was an accountability review that the DNC was doing that Ken Martin decided to pull and not release, where you're so tapped in to Democratic Party circles. Where is that conversation at right now? Where is the discussion inside the Democratic Party about, do we need to fundamentally change course and tack in one direction or another? Or are we saying, let's just not worry about it? We've seen across, per your joke earlier, Zoran Mamdani to Mikey Sherrill, we've seen what works. Let's just do that and hit the fuck it button on all other debates.
I mean, I think the discussion is a little bit more in the latter camp because the urgency around winning in 26 is so great. And I think, Matt, you and I'll go back to our shared history together.
Oh gosh, no!
You know,
you might get into my homosexual shirt.
Right. Right. No, but, you know, I was gonna. You beat me there. You beat me there. Back to when we used to share wardrobe. But you know, we were there, and you know, look, it was Schumer was running the DSCC, Rahm was running the D Trip, and you know, they made a point of focusing from the ground up on candidates who were going to play well in those districts and who could speak to a lot of frustrations that Americans were having with the economy. At that time, it was the Iraq War. I can't believe I'm, you know, I feel old saying that, but I think that the approach that Democrats are focusing on is much more a race by race approach right now. It's, if I was going to sum it up, it's within the affordability issue is broad enough that you're going to have both sides. You have sort of the abundance crew that's going to be talking about, we need to build more houses. We need to increase supply on things. You have the more populist wing that is going to go after, you know, sort of corporations but that is those are the flavors of the affordability debate, and they're going to find their best home in each of these races and each of these candidates. So I think that there's not going to be a lot of top-down discipline from the party. I think the emphasis is so much on winning that it's going to be, all right, we're not going to, you know, there's a contested primary in Michigan right now, but you know, I don't think the DSCC or Senate Democratic leadership is going to say that, you know, the Democratic nominee in Maine needs to be having the exact same affordability platform that the nominee in Michigan has, or, you know, or in North Carolina. I think there's going to be room for Democrats to talk about those things. I think the bigger debates are more about the tactical debates, like, do we shut down? Do we not shut down? Is this the right moment for confrontation?
How bullish? Again, I'm really enjoying this opportunity because, you know, despite the fact that we go back, I mean, shit, like 20 years almost. Good gravy.
It was fast, yeah.
Wow, that happened. That happened fast. Well, I mean, because I met your wife first, right? Like, yeah, we met first, and then you and me. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, yes. Despite the fact that we go back so far, embarrassingly far at this point, I actually don't get the opportunity to crack into your brain that often. So, give me another like little insight into what the conversation is in Democratic circles in DC right now. How bullish? Because really what this comes down to, the odds are ever in our favor when it comes to the House. You look at the midterms, despite the predatory redistricting, gerrymandering bullshit, despite the looming potential, and I know people have well-founded conspiracy worries about this, that Trump is going to find a way to undermine the election. I that is valid. Like, that is something to be worried about. But despite all that, the odds are very, very much in our favor when it comes to the House. But a big, big part of the ballgame is the Senate. When I did my end-of-year prediction show with my Republican counterpart, also named Matt, on my Friday show, Political Rehab, we did our prediction for 2026. I said Democrats would come up short in the Senate, and I thought we would end up at like 51-49 against. What is the discussion behind the scenes like among Democrats right now on both the House and Senate? Where are people at? What are they seeing? How are they feeling?
I would say generally there's a confidence, but far from an assuredness, if that makes sense. I realize that's a very fine needle to thread. I think if you look at the fundamentals, you look at history, you look at some of the failed attempts at redistricting that Republicans have gone through. I think there's a sense that if Democrats keep their pedal to the metal and stay focused, that the House is definitely within reach, and it's not impossible. I'm starting to hear a little more optimism about the Senate in terms of possibly getting, hitting that 50 or 51. That would be a really good night for Democrats, but it's not. No one is quoting The Princess Bride and going inconceivable. But I think the caveats there are, one, even without some of these redistricting efforts, the House has been gerrymandered within an inch of its life. So the marginal seats are just like not there to have big, like 1994 or even 2006 style waves or 2008 style waves. So probably a little bit of a ceiling on what the Democratic majority would be in the House. And you also just can't shake the fact that, part of it is Democrats have been grappling with a year of, how did we lose? How did we lose when this is all going on over there? And I do think there's probably a little bit of we can't ever be, there is now a limit on our confidence because, all scenarios are always in play. So I think by and large, it's, there's a hopefulness, there's a resoluteness, but no one's taking anything for granted.
This is going to be far-fetched hour. Okay, you ready? This is even more far-fetched. Oh, you're going to love this. I'm going way, way too far right now. One of the articles I was thinking of writing up, and I decided to do this 25th Amendment one instead, so it's not happening. Maybe it'll happen on Substack. One of the articles I was thinking of writing up was about the mounting pile of bodies that Trump has left behind among his allies and former friends. It is a truly, absolutely gobsmackingly stunning list. And, I thought I was originally going to write this up back when I thought the highlight was Elise Stefanik. And before that, I thought I was going to write it up when I thought the highlight was Marjorie Taylor Greene. But now, the latest is Senator Bill Cassidy, who Trump endorsed his potential primary rival. By the time that this happened, I haven't seen whether his potential rival has announced that she's going to primary him. But this joins a list of Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, Mike Pence, James Mattis, Mark Esper, Rex Tillerson, John Bolton, H.R. McMaster, John Kelly, Anthony Scaramucci, Stephanie Grisham, Cassidy Hutchinson, Michael Cohen, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. So, at this point, if you're a Republican in elected office, you can see your political death warrant has been written, right? Like the writing is on the wall. I am old enough to remember and to have been a congressional staffer when Arlen Specter switched parties. Is there any speculation at this point of any party switches that would, or more realistic, sudden resignations, sudden retirements that would cut the already razor-thin margin in the House or Senate?
Party switches, no. I think that's a bridge too far. I haven't really heard about that. You do get there was a feeling coming out of the holidays that there would be a larger wave of House retirement announcements. That hasn't quite materialized yet, but that could be taking its time. I do think it's not inconceivable. If you want to go to sort of West Wing territory here, like which is I think what you want to do. I know what you want me to say. You want me to say that before 2026 is out, for at least 5 minutes, Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker of the House. It's not.
No, you know what my sick fantasy was? This is like, I know we have, by the way, I'm happy to see Kinky Streets in the chats. Kinky Streets made it. This is my kinky fantasy. This is like how weird I get. Oh boy. You know, my wife listens to this. I'm not sure I want to reveal my fantasies to her, but here we go. I was having this sick moment where I'm like, what if Susan Collins switched parties? That's not going to happen. I'm just, you know, like, this is, like I said.
No, I would, if I could play along here, I would, but it's not.
That's not going to happen. Yeah.
Well, and look, there's history for it, right? Like Jeffords went independent and actually flipped a majority in the Senate.
Right.
You know, while I was working there,
I was. We were both there.
Yeah. You know, so it's, you know, it has happened before. It's not, but I think you are much more likely to see people stand down or step out than you are to see them kind of go across the aisle. I just think the politics of the moment are such where, you know, but if you're in the shoes of what, you know, Collins or whoever else today's Specter would be, and you make that move, you've kind of left, you know, and this again goes to the larger polarization. You're probably not bringing much of your base with you. And a lot of the Democrats are probably skeptical of your sort of deathbed conversion. So you end up, I mean, Specter did not win that race.
I remember painfully. You know what was so weird was that my boss at the time, after he did that, was running for the U.S. Senate. Here's a piece of inside baseball for people. So a third of the Senate is up for re-election every 2 years. And the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, at least at the time, they probably still do this, convenes a weekly meeting of all of the campaign managers or chiefs of staff for all of the Senate candidates. And my boss was a House member, but he was the only guy. So I used to attend this meeting. And we had this super duper awkward moment where Arlen Specter's chief of staff started showing up at our campaign strategy meetings. And it was like, can we talk about stuff now? Or is this weird? Like, you're one of us now? Welcome. It was very strange. No, it's probably from a bygone time. And this is surely a political fantasy. But I think my main point with Cassidy was much more of like an Elise Stefanik thing. It's like, really? Like, you saw this coming, man. Like, you saw this coming. It was fruitless to try to pretend that you could somehow suck your way up to Trump and like, oh yeah, I'm going to rubber stamp RFK Jr. That'll work. I'm going to just completely abrogate my Hippocratic oath as a physician and say like, oh yeah, this guy who's been an anti-vax conspiracy theory insanophile like for decades now, yeah, he's fine. He's good. This will all be great. So anyway, I guess that's not going to happen either. All right, look, I've got to let you go. You are a busy man. You are highly sought after by organizations around the country who want to understand what's happening inside the Senate, inside the House, inside the Democratic mind. I will say thank you for at least walking us through. I said at the top, my objective here was to at least understand the options, the trade-offs, the potential strategies. I have a particular point of view. I have a particular set of preferences. My objective was not necessarily to persuade everyone else. I just wanted to capture for an hour that there are nuances here. And as much as I'm as exercised and outraged as anyone, as I think most of the people who are chatting are, I don't think any of us feel like we can be guided by that. We have to make smart decisions. The future of the country and the world is on the line here. So we can't just be ruled by our rage. And I think you've done that really effectively. On the way out, do you have a wild prediction for the year?
I can't quite predict the Speaker Jeffries, but that House margin is very small if you have one or two more retirements. Oh man, you're putting me on the spot here. Wild prediction for the year.
I wanted to get at you out of left field. Totally the objective.
I know. You know what? I am going to say big infrastructure bill actually gets done. Congress will do one big thing this year.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Congress will do not just something,
Congress
but
will do a
big
thing.
A bipartisan thing?
Wow. A big bipartisan, highway
in
bill.
some ways, that's
yep.
Yeah, my flabbers are gasted. That's more out there than Speaker Jeffries. I love it. I actually love it. All right. Very good. Ryan, thank you very much for all of your insight, wisdom, analysis. Really appreciate it. I feel very informed. I hope people out there do too. I want to say thank you to everyone who's been active in the chats. I want to say a special thank you to the trolls. I know that's a weird thing to do, but you keep things lively. You keep things fun. You keep it interesting for me. You say crazy things like everything is cheaper under Trump. Then there are normal people who say things like, MJ, I adore you, Matt, but this won't work. Well, I adore you too. So it's mutual. But regardless, I really, really, I appreciate the trolls because you're just helping our YouTube numbers. You're just pushing up the live views continuously. So keep coming. I appreciate it. Thank you to Cynthia Rice and the other moderators who are swatting them away. You're doing exceptional work. And look, in the meantime, I know it's been a rough week. Hang in there, everyone. Stay safe. Be well. We'll see you next week.